You're watching Bloomberg Law. I'm Lee Pacchia. The news just seems to get worse and worse for law school graduates as high debt levels and a lack of high-paying jobs continue to plague the profession. Joining me now to discuss what these trends ultimately mean and whether they will reverse anytime soon, we have Paul Campos, professor of law at the University of Colorado at Boulder School of Law. He's also a blogger at Lawyer, Guns, and Money. It's a blog you should all check out. I should say he's joining us via Skype from Colorado. We're very happy to have him here. Paul, I want to start off with the most recent NALP numbers for 2011 graduates. You had a breakdown on your most recent post on Lawyers, Guns, and Money last week, and I got to be honest with you, it was really grim. You basically summed it all up by saying that 1 out of 3 2011 law school graduates ended up with a real legal job 9 months after graduation. The trend just seems to be getting worse and worse. Is this set of data setting off alarm bells in legal education? Are people starting to get it?
People are starting to get it, although there's a great deal of denial that still has to be cut through. What's happening is that there's a very sharp decline in applications to law school that's taking place. Applicants are down by about 25% over the last 2 years. And a lot of schools have announced just in the last few weeks that they're cutting back the size of their classes, and other schools are considering doing so. So this is beginning to hit law schools in their own pocketbooks. And so finally, legal academia is beginning to wake up to the enormity of the crisis that's facing our graduates.
Right. Is it enough, though? I mean, it's a 25% decline, and those are for people that are going into the system. Really, it delays, that correction 3 years. It takes 3 years to get to law school, and then you enter the workforce if everything goes according to plan. Is that enough, or does something else have to happen here to meaningfully impact the trend that we're seeing play out today for people just getting out of law school?
Well, what has to happen, I think, in terms of adjustment to the new structural realities is that we need to be producing about half as many law school graduates as we are right now at about half the price for each of those individual graduates. So there has to be an enormous structural correction that is just at the very beginning of taking place right now. And unfortunately, for the people who are just graduating now and who've graduated recently, they're graduating into a situation in which they have enormous debt levels, and really only about maybe 20 to 25% of them are getting jobs that justify the debt levels that they have incurred by going to law school.
Right. You stole my thunder here. The reason this employment picture is so bad is that law school grads have so much debt, more so than other students. You've said, in fact, that law grad debt is in the 98th percentile of debt among people with student loan debt. Why is law student debt so much higher than other educational debt?
Well, first, in this country, of course, you have to have an undergraduate degree before you go to law school, which is a very unusual situation from a comparative international perspective. What that means is that people who are going to law school usually already have undergraduate debt. So then on top of that, you have the debt that is acquired by going to law school. And what law schools have done is they have quadrupled in real terms and inflation-adjusted terms the cost of going to law school over the course of the last generation. So those two factors mean that the average debt incurred by people who are graduating from law school right now, educational debt overall, is probably in the neighborhood of $125,000 to $130,000. And that's climbing very rapidly because the tuition increases that law schools have been undertaking have a sort of a long-term ripple and delay effect with people who are just getting into law school now. So the people who will be first-year law students this September, they're going to graduate probably with around $150,000 of educational debt on average. And it's important to note two things about this debt. One is it's very high interest debt. This debt averages about 7.5% interest. So that's on $150,000 of debt. That's about $11,000 of just interest that's accrued every year on that principal. And the second thing that's really crucial in regard to this debt is that it's not dischargeable in bankruptcy. There's essentially no way to get rid of it. And so what we're creating is a class of indentured servants to the United States Treasury, since these are all now pretty much federal loans, who have no realistic way of being able to pay this money off. And it's really a generational disaster.
Yeah, I mean, some people are saying that, applying to law school in this day and age is tantamount to economic and financial suicide. That said, why do you think people continue to apply to law school? We've only seen applications drop off, as you said, 25%. I would think it would have been more.
Well, there's a couple things. One is there's a long delay, a long-term lag effect in terms of the information getting through to the culture. People still think of law school as a kind of low-risk option for risk-averse people who are graduating with maybe otherwise not terribly marketable liberal arts degrees from undergraduate schools.
That's right. I had one. I was a classics major.
Yeah. Well, I was an English and history major when I graduated from undergraduate way back in the 1980s, and back then it was true. Back then, at that time, it more or less made, even though the conventional wisdom wasn't completely true at that point, there was enough truth in it that it made sense to go to law school as a kind of risk-averse choice for many, many people. The problem is that situation has been gradually deteriorating over the course of the last 20 years, and it has deteriorated drastically in the course of the last few years because of long-term structural changes in the market for the providers of legal services, twinned with this extraordinary increase in the cost of getting a law degree. So the cost of getting a law degree has skyrocketed at the very same time that the long-term value of a law degree as an economic matter has been deteriorating, leading to the present situation where the average law student is graduating with a degree that has a negative net present value.
Why has tuition skyrocketed at this pace? It's outstripped the increase in wages in the legal profession by an extraordinary amount. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the graph is just ridiculous. Why do we have this continued divergence?
The main factor, I think, here in terms of law school tuition being raised so high is it's been raised by schools because they could do it. Because the federal government will allow anyone who is accepted to a law school who is not currently in default on an educational loan to borrow 100% of the cost of attendance, no matter what the cost of attendance might be. If a law school, such as several private law schools now, want to have a cost of attendance for 3 years of $250,000, they can do that, and you can borrow $250,000, which, by the way, will be $285,000 by the time you graduate because the interest accrues over the course of your legal education. You will have $285,000 in federal debt with absolutely no safeguards as to whether you'll be able to pay it back, whether it makes any sense for a law school to charge that much. So in other words, they did it because, or I should say we did it, because we could do it. And of course, then we found all kinds of post hoc rationalizations for doing so. It's greatly decreasing faculty to student ratios, doubling faculty salaries, building luxurious physical plants, hiring enormous numbers of administrative staff, essentially all the kinds of things that universities in general do to justify increasing the cost of attendance. But law schools have really gone overboard, I think, in being the sort of canaries in a coal mine, if you will, in regard to this general crisis in higher education. And this has left us in the situation where we are today, where we just simply do not have a sustainable long-term business model in legal academia. But the people who are paying for that in the short term, both literally and metaphorically, are our graduates.
Yeah, I mean, I got to ask, if we're faced with this situation on the business side in legal academia, are we going to see more law schools close? We had Nancy Rappaport on the program a couple months ago, and she said that we would eventually see that trend play out. Do you agree with her?
Yeah, I agree with her, absolutely. Law schools are going to, there's a saying that I like along these lines is the old economist Herbert Stein, who used to say, he was, I think, the president of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Nixon. He used to say, if something can't go on forever, it won't. And what we have right now, the trend lines that we have right now cannot go on forever. Some law schools are going to close, others will merge, others will greatly reduce in size. I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't have the ability to see into the future in those precise terms, but there's no doubt that there's going to be a major contraction in legal academia.
I want to talk about this crisis as it pertains to the macro economy. You closed out one of your recent blog posts with a really interesting line that I wanted to share with you. I'm quoting now, that the law school crisis is embedded in a much larger social crisis is rather all the more reason to stop eating our young. Could you tell us what you meant by that line?
The law school crisis is symptomatic of much, much larger social trends. If the rest of the economy were in such shape that bright young people with a lot of energy and ambition had someplace else to go that made a lot of sense for them, then it wouldn't be nearly as big of a crisis. It would be a problem for law schools, but it wouldn't be as much of a problem for society as a whole. The problem is that many people are going to law school now partially because they have bad information, but also because the alternatives are so bad for them. They don't have any. We have a large class, a whole generation of highly educated young people who have nothing that they can do that really justifies either the cost or the effort that they have put into in acquiring higher education. That's a recipe for social turmoil. And I think it helps explain why so many people now go to law school, not as a kind of risk-averse thing so much as a kind of act of almost desperation, where they're signing up now, even though they're beginning to get the message that the employment and salary statistics are really dire given the cost of going. Because very often they feel like they have no other good alternatives, and so they're choosing law school as the lesser of a number of evils, and that I think is a problem for our culture and economy and society in general that goes way beyond the specific problem of what's going on in legal education today.
So what to do? Is this simply a matter of lobbying Congress to reform the bankruptcy code, or is there something else that needs to be done to reverse this trend?
Reforming the bankruptcy code would be very important. I think educational loans have to become dischargeable under appropriate circumstances, because otherwise they really become life-wrecking, I think, for an entire generation. Congress, I think, has to start taking a very active role in overseeing the amount of money that the federal government is loaning, no questions asked, to people, allowing them to make what are going to be economically catastrophic choices for them. So we need to make student loans dischargeable. We need to stop institutions of higher education from being able to get the taxpayers to simply fund whatever it is that those institutions want to do, whether it makes any economic sense or not. And we need to get the word out there to prospective law students and to their families about what the real numbers look like. I mean, transparency isn't the answer to all of this problem, but it's an important start, and it's something that we are making real progress on. But all of these things have to take place in order to produce the long-term result, which is we need to produce a lot fewer lawyers at a much lower cost.
All right. Paul, we're going to have to leave it there for now. This is a problem that has been a long time coming, and I think it's going to take a long time to solve. Hope you come back and talk to us as further developments occur.
Thanks for having me, Lee.
Of course. That's Paul Campos, professor of law at the University of Colorado at Boulder School of Law. If you'd like to learn more about the cases and issues we just discussed, be sure to check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and also on the Bloomberg Terminal. You can see more of our videos on YouTube, and you can follow our updates on Twitter. I'm Lee Pacchia. Thanks for watching.